Hello. Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here. Internet's busiest music nerd. Look, before I get into this video, if you would like to make your own Blankthony Blanktano hat, dad hat, snapback, beanie, hit up the link down below. I'm looking like I got some real dad energy going on right now. Anyway. Going to be talking about the Beatles, Abbey Road, classic record. This year, turning 50 years old. It's crazy. It's amazing. It's nutso. Why not celebrate that anniversary with a new mix, a slightly new sound? Because around this time, this record would be having a midlife crisis or something. It's getting close to Medicare age, to Social Security age, although I guess this record is from the UK. The Beatles are from the UK, so any health issues that they have, I hope would be taken care of by the NHS. But I digress. Anyway, Abbey Road, still to this day, is an amazing record, is an influential record, is a fantastically written record. Songs like Something, in my opinion, are some of the best love songs of all time. For the year that this record came out, 50 years ago, the engineering still sounds crisp, beautiful, amazing. Even if you're listening to an original mix on vinyl of this record, it sounds fantastic. It sounds great. And even recent remasters of this thing have not been all that bad. So I guess we're hearing a slightly different sonic presentation of this record this time around with, of course, a bunch of studio demos and other rough cuts of songs the Beatles had released around that time, like the Ballad of John and Yoko, which, I mean, you should know about if you're a Beatles fan. Amazing song. The release of this thing is very much in line with the release of the White Album, the re-release of the White Album with, hours and hours and hours of bonus material. The Abbey Road drop over here, I was hoping was going to be as amazing, as much of a revelation. I mean, a record like the White Album, getting access to a new mix of that project where you're hearing different nuances in the record that just really truly were not there before, and you're getting access to all of this bonus material that I think is a must listen for anybody who's a huge fan of that record, because the White Album for that time in the Beatles' discography was such a weird creative spot in their catalog, because each member of the band was writing from such a different and a wild place. The variety of emotions and sonic palettes and singing styles across that record are pretty incredible. And to get access to the ability to just sort of like look under the hood and hear those studio demos, hear those extra bits, it's kind of like just unraveling an entirely different world. Now, this Abbey Road Super Deluxe Edition doesn't from the outset seem to be as massive, seem to be as ambitious an undertaking, and I guess I could see why. It's not as weird, as sprawling, or as unpredictable an album, so I imagine you're going to have less weird stuff coming out of it in general. And that's not to say that Abbey Road wasn't groundbreaking, wasn't doing interesting things. All of the quickly segueing and gorgeous tracks on side B of this record certainly made for some of the most entertaining and groundbreaking rock music and pop music of the 60s. So this record was definitely bold for the time that it came out. I would argue it is still so today, still intriguing today. And what exactly does this new mix bring to this project? Again, as I said earlier, I think this is one of the most well-produced albums of the 60s, one of the most well-produced rock and pop albums of all time. There's not a whole lot here, in my opinion, certainly not as much as what's on the White Album, in terms of weird, unorthodox mixes to begin with, so I'm not sure what might end up being pulled out of these tracks outside of maybe heavier, weirder, more alternative cuts, such as I Want You, She's So Heavy, the incredibly fuzzy, large, thick climax that song comes to. Maybe that will sound different. And certainly it did. If there's anything noticeable about the new mix on these tracks, and this is kind of disappointing and stereotypical given music in 2019 and the state of the loudness war and compression. But I think the most obvious characteristic of this new mix in comparison with other recent remasters and the original mix of the record is that it is louder. It's louder. Everything pretty much sounds louder. Now, I wouldn't say it sounds louder to the point where it sounds like too many dynamics are stripped out of the record and it ruins the sound and it's too boomy or anything like that. I mean, as I said earlier, I Want You, She's So Heavy. It certainly makes the end passages of that song sound a bit more intense, a bit more crushing. But do I need the very subtle rolling drum fill at the kickoff of something to be as loud and just be like right up front in my face just as the song is beginning? No, not really. I don't really feel like that adds that much to the track. Again, doesn't ruin the song, doesn't make it unlistenable. I will say there were a few tracks off of the White Album, some of my favorite tracks, in fact, that the new mix kind of ruined, and it just made them sound very weird, clunky, and not all that gratifying, especially Helter Skelter. I can't say there is a single song on this new mix of Abbey Road that sounds worse, that sounds worse for the change. But I don't think the change is all that revolutionary or even necessary. I think you could have easily put out the same exact mix of the last remaster and paired it with all the demos that you have here, and it would have been just as gratifying a project. I'm not really wowed by this new mix, frankly. Now, having said that, going down the list here of some of the demos, of which there are quite a few of, well over an hour of, there are a lot of interesting bits here. Hearing a take of the Ballad of John and Yoko in the rough state that it is was really cool. Hearing the string sections from Something was certainly really cool. Hearing other takes of non-album tracks like Old Brown Shoe, I thought was pretty cool. I mean, the rougher versions and alternate takes of tracks from this record, I thought were pretty interesting. You Never Give Me Your Money, Take 36, hearing that song performed in the raw state that it is on that song, certainly, I guess, portrays the track in a new light, not a negative light. I think if you're a hardcore fan of this record, it's really the demos, it's really the extra tracks, it's really all the banter that is on some of these recordings that makes listening to the super deluxe version of Abbey Road worth it. I wouldn't say the remix is revolutionary or creative enough to really warrant any major type of praise. I think the biggest compliment I could give to this new mix is that it didn't fuck the record up, but basically, for the most part, everything here just sounds louder. Listening across the record, I didn't really pick up on anything that I wasn't really already aware of. I can't say anything sounded all that enhanced. I can't say anything sounded better than it did when I first heard this album on vinyl and listened to it in the comfort of my bedroom when I was, I think, probably in high school. It's amazing that I can be aware of an album like Abbey Road for as long as I have, and it still has an impact on me listening to it years and years and years after I originally did. That, I suppose, was a positive coming out of listening to this new mix of this album. But I don't know. I can't really say the very subtle changes to the sound of this album are really enough to freak out about. But again, I think a lot of that has to do not with any one person's work on this specific deluxe edition of the album, but again, the sonic qualities of Abbey Road to begin with were already impeccable. Like in terms of the clarity, in terms of the richness, in terms of the layering, in terms of the EQing, there wasn't really a whole lot, in my opinion, to improve upon. Still, I wouldn't tell anyone to shy away from listening to this edition of the record. I mean, most people these days, especially if you're younger, you're used to thick mixes, you're used to compression, you're used to louder music. Maybe the volume of this will speak to you more than a previous remaster of this record, potentially. And anyone who is not familiar with this work, not familiar with this album, I would encourage you, listen to it. You don't have to be a Beatles expert to enjoy it. You don't have to hear all their previous stuff. You don't got to do all this groundwork or anything. Just frickin' listen to it. It's a fantastic record. Listen to it, love it, enjoy it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, the Beatles, forever.